think that's planned, huh? Planned maybe.
I don't know, very slow.
Well, being 9 o'clock, I'll call the Marathon County Infrastructure Committee to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and good morning to everyone. Moving on to number 3, public comment. I haven't had any requests for public comment. Jim, have you? No. Dave, anything? Okay. All right, well, we don't have anybody online, so we'll move on to number 4, approval of September 1st, 2022, and October 6th, 2022 Infrastructure Committee meeting minutes that are in your packet. Is there any discussion, corrections? Motion by Robinson. Second by Straub, excuse me. I was going to call Gary. Is there any discussion? Any discussion, corrections? Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to number 5, policy issue discussion and potential committee determination. We have done. Moving on to 7, as education or operations functions required by state statute. Resolutions or policy, we have none. Moving on to number 7 is educational presentation and committee discussions. 7A, we have an update from CCIT, Jerry Klein, and it's all yours.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? It's the end of the cord. As long as it gets. The only one well, there's information in your packet on projects, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the ERP project. And we've talked about it a few times, but I wanted to give you a current update. So that, just to remind people what that is, that's the industry calls that type of product ERP because it's enterprise resource planning. But in essence, it's the financial system and the human resource system and the payroll system. Really, it's those 3 things together, and of course, they interact pretty closely. We are still planning to go live at the end of the year. The way that it works out is go live has to be done for the county. The payroll piece of it starts actually in place on December 12th because that payroll period finishes 2 weeks later, and then it gets paid out 2 weeks after that, which is January 6th, I think it is. Right now where we're at is we're doing what's called parallel payroll testing. It's a very labor intensive and very scheduled, highly scheduled time frame for 2 4-week sections. We're just finishing today and tomorrow the first 4-week section. What we do basically is we load the payroll from 4th of July week of this year. We take it out of the old system and put it into the new system. It's quite complicated because we have an incredibly high variety of earning codes, and we have a number of departments that do stuff in paper. And then people are hand keying stuff into other systems, which is one of the things we're trying to accomplish is get rid of paper processes and automate as much as possible. So we are just about done with the first one, and basically the vendor requires us to be at 95% accuracy to compare the 2 systems by the end of the 4th week on 3 things: on earnings, how much people make, on deductions, and then on taxes. And they're just finishing the tax piece of it today. I think they'll be done by noon, is what I gather. And then on Monday, we will start with the next 4-week cycle, which is the next 2-week pay period after that. So it's the middle of July of 2022. They'll be loading that. The big challenge that we have in front of us right now is just getting everybody trained, getting what they call job aids, which is basically the training material. We have a fair amount of the payroll side and timekeeping side of the job aids ready to go, but we have a lot of work to do on the financial job aids, which have barely been started, and then the managers that need to use the system for a lot more than the regular staff do. because the managers will be going in there, and that's where they'll request someone to be hired. They'll go through the recruitment process. They'll, what they call onboard, once they offer someone and they accept it, that whole onboarding process. And then managers will use it for performance review processes, and staff will log on to, all of the employees can do it either on their phone or at home or at work. They'll, 24 hours a day, they'll be able to get to a portal where they can do things like check their pay stub, change their home address, change their bank deposit amount, set their emergency contacts. And then in next fall will be another big change, because that's when we'll do the health insurance enrollment process will be done completely online. Today it's done in paper. And so that process will happen in fall. It has been extremely stressful to the team. Lance has been very involved in the project as well, trying to keep up with it. We've had a couple of people, 2 key people resign because of the extra workload from it. We're using a lot of contractors right now. We're burning through a lot of money on contractors at the moment, but that was expected and budgeted for. There's North Central Technical College went to this system. It's a very popular new system. It's been around for maybe about 8 years, which is extremely new in that market. This is the main competitor for this is PeopleSoft. You guys have probably heard that term. That's really the big competitor for this product out in the market. So as far as I know, we're going to be on schedule for go live, but we will be doing cleanup for it not cleanup, but we'll be doing a lot of other work after it for months to come. And then once all of that stuff settles down, hopefully by March or April of 23, we'll start focusing more on reporting pieces of it, doing the financial audits piece of it. And then what we need to do is shut down the old system. So we will probably from May to August, we'll be doing all kinds of exporting of data out of the old system so that we can turn it off by the end of the year. Those systems cost a lot of money to run every year, and so we don't want to have maintenance any longer than necessary. Questions on it?
Is there any questions?
Lance, do you have anything to add?
But I just had, when you said 3 things that's going to be 95% accurate, is that, it can't be 100% accurate, or there's no such things out there?
I don't think you'll ever get out there, especially, I mean, in really homogeneous environments, that would be the case, but we have literally hundreds of earning codes. I got really involved in this a couple of years ago when we put in a time reporting system called IntelliTime for the Sheriff's Department. The scheduling and all the deductions and extra things that they do are incredibly complicated. I don't expect us to get to 100%. The reality is, on our current system, it's not very. Oh, thank you. On our current system, it's not very accurate. One of the things that happen when you start dealing with this stuff is you dig into it and you're like, well, why is this person doing that? What's this earning code? Why is that? And then you realize that you had actually been paying them wrong before. Usually very small, tiny amounts of money, but you find these little tiny mistakes all over the place. And so we just account for those and not note them and say, okay, we got to fix that.
Thank you. Any other questions?
99 the next time. Yeah, we have to be at 99 by the end of the next 4-week cycle.
Okay. Supervisor Stroh?
Thank you. That's a good point.
Yes, Jerry, you mentioned PeopleSoft. Could you explain it? Jerry, could you explain more what PeopleSoft means to the county? I don't understand the PeopleSoft.
PeopleSoft is the product we're not using. That was the one, that was really the main one that we looked at compared to this product. So it's the competitor for Workday. It's the largest competitor for Workday in the market. All of those systems do those kind of 3 big things. They do financial stuff, so they do your budget. They do accounts payable, accounts receivable. They add that's where you pay your vendors. The second big piece of it is human resources, what they call human capital management in that world. That's where that's where it says Jerry started at this date. He's making this money. His title is this. He's on our health insurance, so this needs this deduction. He gets a uniform, $12 a month uniform allowance. Thank you. Look at that word. All of that stuff happens in the human resource side of it, and then the third piece is payroll, which really isn't, you can imagine payroll goes across both of them, right? So the human resource people say, Jerry's here, he's working at this wage, and he does this many hours per pay period, and then that has to actually come out of the right account. So that's where it kind of drifts into the financial side of it. And that gets really complicated when you get into departments with grants, because they'll actually have staff that says, I worked 8 hours in the morning on this grant, and then I worked 4 hours in the morning on one grant, and then I worked 4 hours on training. So the staff, as they do time reporting, they have to be able to get that granular on it. Does that help?
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to 7B, review of Transportation Development Association meeting on 10/27 of '22. And Kevin's got that. I was also there, and so was Supervisor Robinson.
Yep, I'll just run through a few quick notes. Transportation Development Association, they did roundtables throughout the state, and WASA's was the last one, and that was last week. Basically, transportation representatives from county, local, we had Marathon County, we were there, Wood County presented, Village of Marathon City, and then Mike Coles from the Towns Association also just started some discussion, and then we had roundtable discussions throughout the group. Some of the main things hit on there, fuel tax was quite a bit of discussion around that, electric vehicles, funding issues with rising construction costs. Some of the BIL funding was highlighted, and two of the big things that concerns with that was with the BIL is there's additional money out there, but there's a lot of increased costs on construction. Things are up 10, 20, and 30%. So some of those projects have been scaled back and scoped back a little bit. And then some of the communities were having issues with match money, where if they have to come up with 20% match money, that they're not able to take advantage of that because they didn't have that type of funding around to take on some of their projects. A couple of key statistics that kind of stuck with me that you guys probably see more often than I do, with like levy limits being essentially capped at with community growth. Most communities are seeing, plus or minus 1% growth in their levy limits, and then they're having these projects with 10, 20, and 30% cost increases, and keeping up with that isn't real practical. And one of the, I don't remember which community was that they hit on, was that their health insurance premium increase for the year was more than what their tax levy increase was, which means that you have to stay flat on everything else. And as those costs went up, basically you were going backwards with it. So a lot of the challenges, some discussion, and TDA and Towns Association are both working to be kind of advocates to keep that information out there as those costs go up. And if the revenue doesn't go up, the level of service essentially has to go down on them. Do you guys have anything from your experience?
What I found interesting when they were talking about the gas tax and the electric vehicles, it's going to be difficult if these electric vehicles become more prevalent around here. It's going to cut down the usage on gas, and they really don't have any solutions or ideas at this point how they're going to try to offset those the gas tax where electric vehicles are not going to be charged with that. And then when they talked about the levy limits and raising the gas tax, was it Mike from the Towns Association? He thought there's a good there could be a possibility of raising that. I don't know that where he's getting his information from, but probably got a lot more information than I do, but that hasn't been increased for a long time.
Yeah, it was kind of speculative information, but I think they said 2050, they're expecting 30 to 40% of the vehicle fleet to be electric. It's crystal ball, but that was some of the data that they were looking at, and then adjusting it for funding roads off gas tax. And if that comes to fruition, that 40% of people aren't putting gas in their cars, then that funding mechanism isn't going to work.
Jim?
Just for your own information, you mentioned electric vehicles. I know one or two people that have them, and the response I always get is, "Well, we pay an extra $100 a year extra for a registration fee." If you figure out what the gas tax is, if that vehicle would get on average 25 miles a gallon. That would equal that they only can drive about 4,600 miles a year. And then after that, we start losing money. So if they drive less than 4,600 miles a year, that covers their extra registration fee. But otherwise, that what they pay extra really doesn't hit the bucket at all.
Thank you. John, did you have anything to add?
Not on that one, there were a lot of different things. Just to pick up on Jim's last comment, I went to, or participated in the big Be Bold Wisconsin, Transportation Competitive Wisconsin seminar, and they were talking about the average vehicle that gets, along those lines, 12,000, or driving 12,000 miles a year, they're paying $160 in gas tax, so there's that difference. Right now, we've got less than 1% of the vehicles are electric vehicles. They're GM by 2035 is going 100% electric. The concern that was expressed, and there was somebody from UW-Madison Engineering Department, is that there's not enough lithium and cadmium to power all the batteries. So they'll need to continue to evolve and look at other things. But there's somebody from MG&E on talking about power stations and the grid, and there may be ways to tap in and realize some revenue through that as well.
Thank you. Tom?
On those EVs, the electronic vehicles, I think they're so far behind technology-wise. I know two individuals, one has a Tesla. He comes from Black River Falls to Marshfield. Takes him 7 hours to charge that before he can go back home. A guy bought a new Ford F-150 EV, all electric. They were telling him 350 miles. He was hoping to get 300. He pulled a trailer to Eau Claire, a small trailer, he got 90. So that technology still isn't where it needs to be.
Yeah, I agree, and like I said, it's the 2050, I don't know, if they expect that many to be electric, but I think the infrastructure is gonna have to change, where they're gonna put all the charging stations and realize that it takes electricity to charge them, so, that's gonna put more demand on that, so. Any other questions, comments? On that? Okay. All right, moving on to 7C, review the North Central Regional Commissioners Committee meeting on 10/28. I have John down to make comments. I was not there, and I don't think anyone else was able to make it. So, John, if you have anything to add?
Well, and Chris was there as well, and they talked about Jim a lot, but he wasn't there. So you pay the price. Jerry Petrusky was there, and he shared some of his parting thoughts about, I think, growing polarization in politics, and how it's sometimes hard to get people to sit down and have dialogues. But he focuses comments on two areas: transportation aids and shared revenues. And he pointed out that we're down to 17% of the transportation fund going to debt payment from 23%, and they paid off $750 million in debt. And that's a good thing. But then he also talked about shared revenues and the need for $100 million infusion and deal with some of the inequities relative to the distribution. He raised the issue of the gas tax and the electric vehicles and registration fees and how we're going to fund things going forward. And then our own Molly was there, along with Roland Hawk, talking about some of the challenges relative to the workplace. Molly did a very good job of how we need to change in terms of recruiting, some of the incentives, stressing some of our benefits. One of the big issues is the cost of CDLs, which can be $8,000 to $12,000 to get somebody licensed. And Wood County is looking at a 36-month promissory note for training. If they stay, it's forgiven. If they leave, they have to repay it. It's just and it's sort of an incentive to try to get people in there. But there were a lot of different ideas thrown out about how you go about recruiting and retention. But there's a shortage all over. Craig Thompson, Secretary of the Department of Transportation, was there, and he talked about $466 million of new revenues going into decreasing bonding into our roads, We talked about highway improvement programs in the Southeast Mega program with all of the interchanges down there. He talked about, state highway rehab programs, just the needs that are out there. There's significant needs. There's money coming in through the bipartisan infrastructure law with the 5 years, 25% increase in the formula funds, $1.1 billion over 5 years to the state of Wisconsin, $450 million per year for bridges. That's all being committed to the local system. Additional $300 million for the STP program. Dan Federle talked about the November letting for projects. He really spent quite a bit of time about expediting project to try to get them classified as low-risk projects, which have different standards and are quicker and cheaper. He also spent quite a bit of time talking about the Towns Association's push to take over local roads, local road improvement program from counties, and turn over the administrative fees to the towns from the counties. And he's not opposed to it, but he wants to sit at the table to talk with the state relative to contracting for local roads and others. But I'm sure that there will be discussions. They want to pilot it in 2 districts on the western part of the state. He then spent time talking about the waters of the state legislation and rulemaking that is taking place on the federal level, 1,000 pages of regulations, and just the need to be practical and realistic in those proposals. He spent some time talking about some of the safety issues, flaggers, Bill of Rights, general transportation aid, and routine maintenance agreements with DOT. Chris?
The only thing I would add is, Molly gave a really good presentation, I thought, from the HR perspective about the recruiting and the retention. And one of the things she had mentioned was something the administrators talked about, younger people not really looking at the benefits, but looking at the wages and bopping back and forth. An interesting perspective is afterwards when we were eating, I was sitting next to a gentleman from one of the counties who was recently hired this summer, a younger person. He said one of the reasons, the primary reasons that he actually works for the government is so that he can work 25 years, 30 years, and retire. And I asked him how he had that thought process, and he said, because people spoke to me about that. His family spoke to him about retirement and the ability that, you're not going to get all your wages. It's not going to be all about wages. It's going to be about these great benefits, which I think is important. So I do have a brother who retired from the Air Force. I have a father who retired from city government in New Jersey, and I see the benefits that they reap from that every month. And so I just want to mention that because I think sometimes maybe we say, the young people aren't looking for that, but if you can position that and show that to them that after so many years you can actually have this nice retirement, something to fall back on, which is going to be guaranteed, I think is a great thing.
Thank you. Go ahead, Lance.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. We've been talking about how to, I think Supervisor Dickinson's spot on. It's that we haven't reached the individuals, the prospective employees, in a way that they understand the benefit. I really don't even fully understand what my retirement benefits are. They're complex, and when we ask people to go online and go to the ETF calculator and understand what the benefits are, it's not speaking to them in a way that gets them to apply for the job. So we've been talking about, how do we better communicate, for lack of a better term, total compensation and total benefits. And it's one of the, every week I meet with group of my colleagues, fellow administrators, and that's one of the topics we've talked about, what's worked well in terms of total compensation communications. And no one has any great insights right now, but I think Supervisor Dickinson is spot on. We need to find the right mechanism to reach the people that are applying for jobs. We also need to do a much better job retaining people by communicating that benefit. And that's one of the things that I want to work with Molly on post-workday is implementation, is this idea, let's be a resource for people when they do go out and get it. Because our people do get offers all the time to go, Jim's department is certainly a great example. People get, I could go, someone offered me $2 more an hour to go drive for XYZ company. And we can sit down and say, hey, why don't you bring that information in and we'll actually help you sit down and show you how that compares to what our total compensation is. Welcome that comparison, because I think Supervisor Dickinson's right. Generally speaking, we have things that other employers don't. That gap has narrowed over time, but communicating the value of health insurance and certainly retirement is something we just need to do better. We need to find better ways of doing that. And the trusted communicators, like Supervisor Dickinson referred to, if you have family members that understand that benefit and communicate that, I think works well as additionally. So, yeah, a lot of opportunity.
Thank you. Supervisor Robinson?
I'm going to pick up on that based on that Be Bold, Wisconsin session. They were talking about, they had the head of Blackhawk Technical College there, and he was talking about Rock and Greene counties, and he said that there are 4,000 people retiring per year over the next 10 years, and there's 2,000 graduates a year. So there's a 2,000 worker shortage, and then they had a representative from Wisconsin Workforce Development Commission there who basically said we do a very poor job of attracting people. And there was a discussion about the youth's different expectations of what they're going to do for a career than they have false expectations many times, and they wind up going into, then you go to college without knowing where that's going to lead, and we need to do a better job of interfacing with them earlier in high school and other things, particularly I think probably for some of the jobs that we have at the highway department. So and Molly mentioned that in her comments and the need for outreach, but we just need to be innovative, and there's a sense of urgency, and it's no longer, one of the comments, it's no longer a spectator sport. When you are into recruiting and trying to attract talent, you need to get in and get active.
Thank you. Any other comments? I can just speak to the Wisconsin retirement system. I'm under that, been under that for 14 years. That was one of the big reasons my dad is retired from the sheriff's department. So it does work when other people emphasize, the benefits of the retirement. John's retired under the same. I was able to go under protective, so at 53 and a half, when I had 30 years in, I got basically a full pension. And so, those are things that people don't look at. And when we used to negotiate the contracts on the police department, and I was the president of the union, I used to emphasize they always wanted money. And I said, we would add another day of vacation, or we would add another day of sick leave that you could bank. And I said, in the long run, when you retire, you're going to thank me for this. I ended up with $26,000 in sick leave bank that I was able to use because I was able to save 120 days of my sick leave. Plus, we got 10 days added to that when you retired. So there's benefits. You have to stress them. And as far as, the compensation with wages, that's not everything, but I know when people come out of college or their first jobs, that's what they look at. But like I said, and I agree with Supervisor Dickinson and the administrator, we need to emphasize our total package that we can give or offer to these employees. So, any other, Tom?
Do the employees know the cost of benefits when you hire somebody at $23 an hour or whatever? Do they know the cost? The cost of benefits are $20 an hour. The cost of benefits are $15 an hour. Is that figure out there, and are they told this?
I can offer some of that. We do reference the total benefit package it's one of the first things, just like anybody, when you take a job, right? You go to your new employer and you have your onboarding, and it's drinking from a fire hose of, these are your benefits, this is the overall package, make your benefit selections. But to your point about ongoing messaging. I think there's an opportunity there to talk differently about benefits. And our wellness program is, it's further down the list, but, there are benefits. That's one of GreenHeck's important benefits that I know. They spend some time trying to make sure people understand. And so I think there's some opportunities. I'm not sure I can answer your question with enough detail. We communicated on the front end, but do we every 6 months or a year communicate that? No. I don't know. Jerry, do you want anything to
I
add?
do actually want to add something to that.
Oh, that's as far as.
That's one of the things that we will be doing, we'll be able to do next year, a lot easier and with a lot less effort, is Workday will be able to produce total compensation report to people. When I was at Liberty many years ago, we started to do that, and typically what we did was we did that around September, October timeframe. We would give every employee got a letter that said, here's your total compensation. This is what you got for your base pay, any overtime. Everything was listed out. Your bonus, your employee stock purchase stuff, if you had any of that, and then this is the total cost of your health insurance. And your retirement, this is how much we matched on your 401k. It all was on a nice, basically, page and a half or so. It was really simple to read. The bottom line, it said, this is your total compensation if you put it all together. And I would expect that we'll be doing that probably next fall. Usually if you talk to the HR experts, what they'll say is, do that a little ways, do that in fall because you're going to do open enrollment right after a few months later or a month or two later, and it's good timing. Yep.
Thank you. John?
I was just going to say, the state of Wisconsin does that for their employees. They give an annual statement, again, income, what's the cost of insurance, income continuation, life insurance, disability insurance, other things, and it's a reminder, and I think an effective retention tool.
Thank you. Any other thoughts? Any other discussion? Okay, thank you, everyone. Moving on to 7D, broadband update. John, you have that?
Thank you. We're waiting for Bug Tessel's October report relative to their activity as of the end of September. They had 3 towers up. They have several under construction. We're working on design and other things, but they're making progress. They are continuing to try to have all their towers constructed by the end of the year. They're 370 miles of fiber connected by next summer, and then they'll start running fiber to the premise along the route. Serenity just completed work on their last year's PSC grant and has submitted a request for payment from the county for that in the Norrie Lake area. Charter is making progress in the RDOF area, the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund area. They've focused on the western part of the county, running through Rib Mountain, Statine, Marathon, and then around the Stratford area this year, and then they've got some other areas. Celeste Flynn from Charter was at the NTIA PSC workshop on Connecting Wisconsin and expressed an interest in having discussions with the county relative to Charter potentially stepping into some of the area that was covered by LTD broadband that was part of the RDOF program until FCC basically kicked them out of the program because they didn't think that they could meet the standards. Bug Tussle and Frontier the last time we talked in early September. We're still waiting the PSC agreement, Public Service Commission agreement for funding for this round of Public Service Commission grants. Frontier is looking to serve 10,500 plus units, and then Bug Tussle about 330 in the Cronin-Water area. They have 2 years from the agreement to complete that work. In terms of mapping, we continue to make slow progress in getting people to do the mapping. The Area Economic Development Associations entered into a one-year contract with GeoPartners, and I've been talking with Andy Faust. GeoPartners will continue to collect the data. The question is, if the contract isn't renewed, will we have access to the information, and that may require counties to do it. So we'll have to evaluate whether we want to continue to promote the GeoPartners speed test or the Public Service Commission has the WISER program where you can get in, they'll collect additional data, but we've been promoting the Geo Partners. Andy was somewhat optimistic about the Economic Development Associations continuing that, but if they don't, we may have to come back. I think the cost would be about $5,000 for us to access that information. We're going to use that information. Jerry and I sat down with Andy Fowles from Regional Planning and then Preston from CPZ to just talk about putting together a map, and Preston's given us a preliminary map showing where the new investments have gone in terms of serving the county. So we're looking at where the $25 million of work that Bug Tussle is going, where that fiber is going, where the towers are, where the power towers will serve from a wireless perspective, where the PSC grants are, where the RDOF grants are, and other things. And we'll overlay that with the speed test information. And we'll begin to then try to target where the county might want to consider applying its resources going forward. We'll also be able to take advantage of the new FCC fiber, or they're developing a new map that will be rolled out early next year. It's out for public review and comment, so we'll be trying to look at that to make sure that the new FCC maps are more accurate than the old ones. They were relying on information from the internet service providers, so that will take some time. We're evaluating whether or not to put the information on the speed test with the local tax bills. Had some discussions with Laurie McSimmons, who was thinking about putting a stuff or a supplement in. That decision will be made in the near future. But just try to get better participation. We're at about 3% of the county has taken the speed test, and it would be good to get additional information. On a long-term funding, at the conference, had an opportunity to both hear the speakers, but also have some discussions with the PSC staff. There's $42.5 billion available for the Broadband Equity and Access Program, or development program, that'll be passed through the states. So that money will be allocated based upon a state plan, and then the Public Service Commission will look at it. The state also has, through the governor, has found another $40 million for capital funding. They're not sure when that money will be available for grants for broadband expansion, but it looks like it will be sometime late in 2023 where there will be another opportunity to submit applications for funding, whether it's the federal money passing through the state or some of the state's reallocated dollars, barring action by the legislature to put additional state funds. But they've spent all this biennial allocation of funds on the first grant round that we were successful in getting funding for Frontier and Bug Tussle on. So lots happening, and we'll share that map with you at next month's meeting to give you an idea of where we are in terms of some of those projects and where the needs may be.
Thank you. Any questions for John? All right, thank you. Moving on to 7E, update on quarterly county highway safety meeting. And Jim's going to cover that.
Yes, we had the meeting yesterday. A couple highlights of the meeting is, excuse me, the Sheriff's Department's reporting people running the red lights on the school bus, probably 3 times higher this year. They're having 3 times the amount of complaints about people running the red lights by school buses. So Ted Connect is going to do a press release next week and hopefully get something out to the media, maybe do a little presser with the media, trying to get the word out that their enforcement's going to be stepped up on school bus red lights. The past 3 months, there was 4 fatalities in the county. One of them was in the city with the bicyclist versus car. The bicyclist had no helmets, no brakes on that car, on the bike. So that was a fatality there. And then the other 3 fatalities were on the roadways, one on 153 and J, one out in the town of Green Valley on Highway C, and one in the town of Plover on Highway N. Speed and other contributing factors were the result. There was nothing really wrong with the infrastructure itself on any of those accidents. It was all other contributing factors. So far, we're sitting at 11 fatalities in the county this year. Last year we had 15 for the entire year. So we're close to maybe being a little bit less than last year. Statewide, fatalities are up from at 321 compared to 293 at the same time last year. The 5-year average is 313. They did talk briefly about ATV accidents are up quite a bit this year, but there's also a large increase in number of machines. There's 153 registered machines out there right now compared to 63,000 just a few years ago. But 60 to 70% of those ATV, UTV accidents are on paved roads. However, the fatalities are down significantly this year. I believe the numbers were like 45 to down to 17 this year. So fatalities are down, accidents are up, and so are the amount of accidents. One thing they're having a hard time getting a handle on it is the DNR has a way to report them, and the county sheriff's departments have another way. So if the DNR is reporting it, it does not go into the same system as if there's an accident involving a vehicle and the sheriff's department comes out there. So there's two different reporting mechanisms. So they're trying to work together on getting a good handle on a better way to report the ATV, UTV accidents. And the last thing I also discussed was the green light bill was passed for municipal vehicles only. We will be getting our trucks outfitted here shortly. We're going to be starting to putting some green amber flashes on our vehicles. Again, those are for municipal only, so you'll be seeing those this year on municipal vehicles. We're working with the Sheriff's Department. I talked yesterday to the state DOT, the Sheriff's State Patrol, excuse me, on trying to enforce that a little bit because we're seeing a lot of privates starting to put green lights on their vehicles, which is not allowed by law. So the green amber lights are restricted for municipal vehicles only, and you'll see those throughout the state this year.
Thank you.
Yes, they are.
Go ahead, John.
Craig Thompson at one of the meetings mentioned that they were seeing a record number of speeding tickets for people going over 100 miles an hour. Are we seeing that in Marathon County, the increases in speed?
I know increase of speed is a nationwide issue. I'm just guessing they didn't report on it, but my guess would be yes. The Marathon County is probably no different than any place else. Again, all three of those accidents, speed were a contributing factor to all three of those fatalities. One of those contributing factors.
Go ahead, Tom.
I have something on buses yet. Once in a while, I have calls with 3 or 4 bus drivers. And I don't know if you might know more about the law on this, but when their yellow light goes on, you do not have to stop, correct?
Correct.
And then when the red light, when they open their door, the red light comes on. So if I'm a car that's passing this school bus under the yellow light, and when I get 20 feet from the back of that school bus and that red light comes on, I'm running that red light. And they've been trying to, Cobussa has been trying to get the state to change that yellow light to red, that when the lights go on, they're red. And I don't know if that's the fact, or...
I'm not aware of the buses, but usually when they have the yellow lights on, they're offloading onto a sidewalk or an area where they're not walking out onto the road. There are requirements when they can use just the yellow light or versus the red lights if the flashing red lights come on. But generally, they put them on ahead of time. They don't put them on, when they stop. Those flashing red lights go on ahead of time so that drivers have time to react to it, so they're not going around it like, and usually, I've talked to some bus drivers, if they just turn it on and a car's going around slow, they're not gonna let that student out until that car goes by and make sure that everybody stops, but it's up to the responsibility of the driver of the car to stop.
Right. See, all of them said that they could turn it on manually, but then when you open the door, it goes on automatic.
I don't know.
So I don't know, but anyway, that's,
Yeah, buses, I don't know how they operate as far as how they activate their red lights. But if so, even if they had the yellow lights on and they were on, well, yeah, use caution. And like I said, even if they have the yellow lights on, they have to open the door to let the kids out. So then the red light should come on if that's, you know, if that's the way they work. So I don't know how. Yeah, I know that driver's training classes, with going, a lot of kids are taking them on the internet. They're, I think, you know, they're getting shorted by not having classes for them. And I know with COVID, a lot of these driver ed, you know, businesses could discontinue doing that. But we used to emphasize that in driver's ed when I taught that. But I don't know what they're doing as far as, you know, trying to get more information out to the, and it's not necessarily new drivers that are doing that. It's, you know, people that have been, you know, had their driver's license for a long time.
Yeah, that's something maybe we can follow up with Ted. I know he's off this week, but maybe before he does his press release, maybe I'll just reach out to him and, you know, have him maybe clear that up during his
I mean, it's
presser.
something if that red light can come on sooner, or if that red light should come on sooner, you know.
Yeah, I'm sure they're trained at when to put them on, but like I said, every situation could be different, just depending on the roadway and the, you know, the traffic pattern that they're driving on, so. Okay, anything else, Jim? Nothing else?
Not for this item.
Okay,
something-
all right. Moving on to number 8, next meeting date, time, location announcements. The next meeting will be December 1st, 2022 at 9 a.m. here. And the only item that I have that I would like to start to discuss next month in December is that special events policy. We had talked about, you know, reviewing that and looking at it again, but waiting until after the budget. So, and I still, we had talked about forming a task force, and we would like to have one person from triple ED, I believe, infrastructure, public safety, and parks. I don't know. I haven't got any volunteers from this committee yet, so if you're, I know there's people that just are waiting to get on there, but before the list, you know, fills up, let me know. But it shouldn't be a, like I said, I think, and Lance, I don't know, for the next meeting, we'll just look at the existing one here, the special events policy that we have, because we know that has to be revised.
Yeah, we can put that in the packet, the existing assembly ordinance. My recollection is it's like section 12.04. So we can put that in the packet and kind of do the, again, just a cursory review of what we went over last time about some of the challenges with the existing ordinance, kind of the discussions that took place a number of years ago that led to the expressed desire by this committee and public safety to make some amendments. I think it's a really, I was just kind of trying to update the work plan a little bit last night, and it's another good example of an ordinance that we really do need to clean up. There was a proposal a number of years ago for a comprehensive code revision, which likewise probably would be a good use of county board resources moving forward. But we can certainly do that, Mr. Chair. If there's anything that anyone wants specifically addressed in that cursory education session, just reach out to Chair McEwen and we can make sure we address those things.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other, if you have any other agenda items or items that you want in there, Jim, go ahead.
For the December meeting, I'll have 2 items on there. I'll have the annual DOT state routine maintenance agreement for you just to review. It'll probably be signed by at that point. Something else that I'll need you to discuss is, it used to be every 3 years there was a round of SDP bridge programs comes out. The SDP bridge program still has a lot of money left into it. They're going to be soliciting for more bridge projects here coming up probably in a few weeks. So we'll have to decide if I should continue to keep applying for 80-20 funding for the next round of bridges that'll be coming up. I know we have quite a list right now, but again, 80-20 funding. We still have that match money, but it's still quite a deal, so I will be bringing that forward. And then also the 2023 Road School, the WCHA Road Conference, Highway Conference, is January 23rd to the 25th at the Chula Vista. If you plan on or like to attend, please let me know so we can get you registered and a room for that conference. Again, we moved it back 1 week this year. Our committee decided to move it back. It always was falling on Martin Luther King Day. We were having issue getting state and federal people in. There's more counties starting to observe that holiday being off, so we moved it back permanently to the week after. So again, January 23, 24, and 25. If you like to attend, let me know so I can get you registered to get you a room.
Okay, thank you. John?
The MPO just approved the transit plan for the county. I think it might be worthwhile to brief this committee on what's in that. While it doesn't directly affect the county, it affects communities within it. It is a planning document. So if we could put that on at one of the future meetings.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Yeah, that is, okay, well, if anything else comes up between now and our next meeting, just let me know or let Jim know. All right, moving to number 9, adjournment, look for a motion. Motion by Tom, second by John. Any discussion? No. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you very much.